Girl, you better practice if you. Her grandmother suddenly collapsed to her knees, causing one of the buckets to wobble precariously. Ugh. Eyes wide, Kane dropped the axe and ran to her grandmother's side. Grandma. The old woman shook her head and pointed a trembling finger at the bucket. Get the bucket. Can't let it spill. Kane steadied the bucket with a foot as she knelt by her grandmother. A small bit of water sloshed over the side and made a new home in the hem of her dress. But Kane didn't notice. Grandma? Grandma, what's happening? Crazed with panic, she grabbed her grandmother by the shoulders and shook. After a moment, the woman lifted her arms and batted Kane away. Stop that. Just stop, she cried, breathing heavily. It ain't like I'm dying, just tired from the trip and all. Kane desperately wanted to believe her, but one look at the old woman's shaking hands and worn face told her more than words ever could. Her grandmother had lived a long, hard life, and it seems the bill was finally coming due. The time when her grandmother watched over Kane was ending. Sooner than either of them had feared, the position would be reversed. The next morning, Kane came to the side of her grandmother's bed and took her wrinkled hand. Grandma, you're sick and you need medicine. I'm going to the village. The old woman shook her head and tried to raise, but Kane gently pushed her down. It's alright, she said. I'll be fine. Her grandmother fixed her with a gaze that couldn't melt steel. After which seemed an eternity, she finally lowered her eyes and sighed. Well, I don't like it, goddammit, but I guess I should quit being so stubborn and let you grow up. The old woman watched as Kane strapped on her boots and made her way down the road to the village. Hours later, as an unseen sun made its way across a dark and rainy sky, she was still watching. Kane moved at a brisk pace, checking her pockets every few minutes to make sure the money her grandmother gave her was still there. Every noise caused her to spin on her heels, making sure she wasn't being stalked by a shade, or worse, Demo and his gang. But she encountered neither tormentors nor shades, and Kane finally found herself at the entrance to the village. The few adults she could see glanced sideways at her, then muttered to each other behind raised hand before slinking away into the shadows, her heart racing. Kane took a series of rapid shallow breaths and tried to calm herself. I have to prove myself. I have to help Grandma. I have to be strong. She chanted those words to herself over and over as she slowly made her way. Finally, her eyes settled on a rotund older woman who was angrily waving her arms in the air, telling anyone who would listen exactly what she thought of Kane's presence. Hey lady, says Kane with a bravado she did not feel. Where's the apothecary? The woman's flabby cheeks shook in withered anger. How dare this thing speak to me, they seemed to say, but Kane saw that her eyes held a different emotion. Fear. Yeah, we're both scared, lady. Trust me on this one. Which way? Kane repeated. The woman pointed at a small building to her right before hitching up her dress and stumbling off in the other direction. Kane cringed, expecting a stone to come flying from the assembled crowd, but none came. Her mind was filled with a strange sense of pride as she made her way to the apothecary, but the new emotions had little time to take root, for as soon as she opened the door, she noticed a familiar customer at the counter. It was Emo. He'd clearly been sent here on some kind of family errand because his gang of followers was nowhere to be found. Oh my God, he sputtered. I mean, what are you doing here, freak? The insult was delivered without force, and Conley happily ignored it. Stretching on tiptoes to see over the counter, she asked the shopkeeper for the medication. Ha, barked Demo. That old bitch finally kneeled over. Go to hell, Demo. The boy's eyes grew so wide they seemed ready to fall out of his head. But before he could let fly a comeback, or worse, a punch, the apothecary told them to knock it off before he kicked them out of the store. Demo slunk out of the shop, cursing Kane under his breath. Once he was gone, she allowed herself to breathe once more, taking a brief tour of the shop while the owner prepared her medication. Countless tiny bottles filled the cramped store, each with a label written in some indecipherable language. An ocean of aromas assaulted her eyes, creating a scent that was exotic but not altogether unpleasant. Seeing such a variety of supplies gave Kane a sense of peace. Surely in a world so vast, there would be a place that she could call home. On the far wall behind the counter rested a portrait of a stunning young girl. The picture had once contained bright vibrant colors, but time had worked its cruel magic, and they were beginning to fade. The beauty of the work, however, remained undiminished. You like that picture? Kanye turned to find the apothecary with a small vial of medicine in his hand. His eyes were gentle but sad, and they seemed to stare through her and into nothing as he spoke. That's my daughter. I sketched it when she was just a little girl. She's been dead a long time now. Connie didn't know how to respond. She just stared at the portrait and tried to come up with the right words. Pictures are wonderful things, continued the shopkeeper. They let the ones closest to you live on forever. He shook his head slightly, then looked down at Connie and smiled. Handing her the medicine, he reached into his sizable green apron and produced a handful of old wax crayons. You should have these. There's no one left that I wish to draw. Kanye took an instinctive step back, causing the shopkeeper's face to darken. Yes, I heard the rumors about you, he said. It's a small village, and words travel quickly. Between you and me, I'm not sure which of them to believe, but I also don't think they matter much. I know your grandmother, Kali, and I think the way she was driven out of this town was just deplorable. Grandma's name is Kali? She thought Kanye suddenly. She was still muddling this new fact over in her mind as she reached out and gently took the crayons from the apothecary's hand. Your grandmother is an old friend of mine, he said as Kanye scooted away yet again, and I own her much. I wager she would like it if you drew a picture of her. Yes, I think she would like that very much. Kanye murmured a quiet agreement, but inside her heart was bursting. Never before had a villager treated her with anything but complete contempt. It was tiny, almost perceptible step, but it was a step nonetheless. And with enough tiny steps, she might one day discover the rest of the world. When Kanye returned home, she found her grandmother asleep in her bed. Her feet were blackened and raw, even bleeding a bit in places, leading Kanye to think that she had pacing around the room until exhaustion finally caught up to her. She placed the medicine by her grandmother's pillow and turned to leave, but found the old woman's hand clasped around her arms. Back already, are you? Asked her grandmother with a yawn. Come here and let me have a look at you. Grandma sat up and examined Connie from head to toe. Finally satisfied that nothing terrible had befallen her grandchild, she leaned back and allowed herself to relax. Well, how was it? Those bastards give you any trouble? It was kind of fun, said Connie with a small smile. No, seriously, it was. Fun, huh? Asked her grandmother in a voice which implied she believed anything but. So anytime you need me to run an errand, just let me know. As she spoke, Kane removed the crayons from her pocket. After a brief explanation of their source, she informed her grandmother that she was going to sketch her portrait. A portrait of me? Ridiculous. No one wants to stare at a wrinkled old croon. But grandma, it makes you live forever. Horse shit, said her grandmother, throwing back the sheet from her bed. Living forever would just piss me off. Now, put those crayons away and help with dinner. But Connie would not relent. In the end, Grandma found herself leaning against the wall of their house as if posing for a master artist. Connie took up the crayons, eyed her subject carefully, and set to work. Just as her grandmother was about to nod off, Connie finished the piece. After staring at it for a bit, she released it from her grip and let it slowly drift to the floor. It's terrible. It doesn't look like you at all. Sorry, Grandma. I thought these crayons would, make drawing easy or something. The old woman's eye narrowed at her granddaughter's disappointment. Let me be the judge of that, she said, ignoring the pain in her back and reaching for the paper. The sketch could have been a person's face. It also could have been a boulder, a lump of clay, or an incredibly misshapen loaf of bread, all rendered in a chaotic array of colors. The old woman stared at the piece for a long time, then slowly wheezed out a laugh. Oh, Kane, she said between laughter, you truly are my blood. You're as clumsy as me, and I love it. But, hush, I won't hear any more bull about how ugly you think it is. It came from the heart, and I'll treasure it always. True to her word, the old woman gave the picture a place of honor above the kitchen table. In the days that followed, Kane would often catch her staring at the portrait with a strange smile on her face, an action she interpreted as silent, mocking laughter. A week later, Kane could stand it no more and asked her grandma to take the artwork down. Posh, said the old woman. I'll take this down when they roll me in my shroud. She pondered this for a bit, then turned to Kane and dropped to one knee. Listen to me, girl. Seeing this picture makes me happy in a way I never felt before, and it makes me want to go on, so that someday you can feel the same happiness. It was a moment that buried itself in Kane's memories. A perfect blend of pride and love and joy that came together to form a lifelong remembrance. She swore to never forget this moment, to never forget the old woman who had made her place in the world possible. Time moves on. People and memories move in and out of a life like ghosts passing through a hall. But this moment will be different, Kane swore, because I will remember it forever, forever. Kane dreams separation. Kane listened to the sound of crackling firewood and stared at the black object on her plate. She had been pushing around the wooden disc for a good 10 minutes, ignoring the bemused stare of her grandmother. Finally, she summoned her courage and gave the object a brief sniff. A sharp, bitter scent flew up her nostrils and made its home there, causing her face to twist with disgust. Grandma, I can't believe you want me to eat a bug. The old woman threw some more wood under the cooking pot and snorted. It's no bug, you fool. It's a berry. Why the hell would I be feeding you bugs? Yeah, well, it sure looked like a bug, said Kane, and I think it's burnt or something because it smells terrible. With that, Kane held her nose and threw the berry in her mouth, chewing as little as possible. Oh yeah, that's terrible, alright? Why, you little brat, laughed the old woman. Look at the sass on you. You've been spending too much time with me. That's a fact. 5 years passed since the moment when Kane's grandmother saved her from the bullies. It's often the way to two stubborn people, their relationship has grown in fits and starts. But moving forward all the same. Meals used to be somber affairs were now filled with laughter and hurled abuse in equal measure. Kane could not remember a time when she had been happier. As the years went by, Kane started to shoulder more and more of daily responsibilities. Her grandmother's leg grew weaker by the day, and she could no longer do many of the chores she used to take for granted. And so, this morning found Kane lacing up her work boots with a breakfast of burned berry rolling through her belly. Where are you going today? Asked Grandma suddenly. Kane looked up surprised. The old woman rarely asked for specifics anymore. Well, I was going to check out the camel's trees and see if they're ripe. I thought we could make some jam or something. Oh, I'm going to pick up some flagstones. So I need to take the wheelbarrow. Flagstones? What in the hell for? Kane stared at her grandmother and held out an arm and swept it across. Kane stared at her grandmother, then held out an arm and swept it around their home. Constructed mostly of cloth, rope, and rubble, the old place sagged like a boxer in the final round. Grandma, a dying cat could chew through this house. I'm going to build a stone wall so we can have some protection. The old woman laughed, exposing her toothless grin to the world. Goddamn girl. If a bunch of thieves want to ransack this old place, let them come. We got nothing worth stealing anyway. I'm not worried about thieves, I'm worried about shades. People saw one west of the village yesterday. The old woman tilted her head and stared at her granddaughter. Well, shoot, I don't know why you have to do it today. We can worry about it some other. Grandma, no. If I don't go to the camp with trees, we won't eat tonight. You know that. A confused expression passed across the old woman's face, and for a moment she was a small child lost in the carnival. Yes, she said after her bed. Yes, of course you're right. I'm sorry, Kane. Lady, it seemed my mind is... She didn't finish the thought. Instead, walking over to her nightstand and gently taking the wreath of lunar tears from the drawer. The flower's petal had aged to a brilliant whiteness, and Kane thought it was more beautiful now than the day she first received it. You're going to be a true woman soon. Grandma said she placed the flowers in the girl's hair. So that means less chatter about shades and building defensive walls, more talk about how beautiful you become. Annoyed, Kane reached up to remove the garland, but the look on her grandmother's face stopped her hand. You're a beautiful thing, said the old woman, and there's ain't another like you in the world. I'm very proud of you. Okay, Grandma. That's enough goddamn compliment for one day. Such a mouth on you. Where do you get that from? Gee, I wonder. I'll teach you to sass me, girl, yelled Grandma. Suddenly, she lurched forward and grabbed Kane by the ear, pulling her around the room with a crazed grin on her face. Grandma, yelled Kane in a cracky voice. Grandma, stop it. What the hell? The old woman stared at her and blinked, then slowly held her wrinkled hand out as if it was the first time she had ever seen them. I don't know what happened there. I'm sorry, girl. Sometimes my mind just... Kane thought the look on her grandma's face was the most heartbreaking thing she had ever seen. Listen, she began. Maybe I should stay home after all. No, I won't have you stay here to keep an eye on old codger like me. You go get your fruit and your wall and whatnot. I'll be fine. And when you come back, I'll have a nice grasshopper dinner waiting for you. Kane rolled her eyes and kissed her grandmother on her forehead and made ready to depart, trying desperately to ignore the word that was gnawing at the walls of her heart. Connie could feel the old woman's eye watching her as she moved down the path. Don't turn around, she told herself, but in the end, the temptation was too great. She spun on her heel for one final look and saw a small bent woman standing in front of the ramshack hut with a sad expression on her face. Gosh, she looked so old now. It's like the wind could reach down and just carry her away. Connie worried about her grandmother all day, causing her work to suffer. What little fruit she could collect was tossed carelessly into the wheelbarrow, and she only found a couple of stones before losing interest in the project. Finally, at dusk approach, she decided to call it a day. Cursing herself with a lack of focus, Connie pushed the nearly empty wheelbarrow down the path. As she crested the final hill, she suddenly froze in place. The wheelbarrow fell from her fingers and collapsed on its side, sending a few pieces of wrinkled brown fruit rolling back down the hill. Her gaze was transfixed by the thick black cloud that hovered just ahead, tracing its path with a finger. Connie suddenly felt her stomach knot in on itself. No, oh gosh, no. Her grandmother's house was ablaze, the flames licking up as if trying to touch the sky itself. Grandma? Connie ran then, faster than she ever moved in her life. Once she tripped on a stone and went sprawling on the rocky ground, but she leapt to her feet and continued running, unmindful of the blood that spilled from her wound. As she got closer and closer, Connie's mind began to race in time with her footfalls. It's too dark. Not just fire. Can't be fire. Too much smoke. Gotta save her. She burst into the front yard and came to the sudden halt. Her worst suspicions confirmed. The smoke from the fire was mingled with a thick, inky blackness of enormous shade. The enormous creature supported itself on 3 twisted feet and achieved balance through means of the large armored tail. Scales, horn, and claws sprouted from his body in a random chaotic pattern, giving it the appearance of a lizard designed by some insane god. Seeing Connie, it let out a roar and flickered its tail, sending small whirlwinds spinning around the yard. For a moment, the creature retreated into shimmering, inky blackness as if her mind was unable to comprehend such a thing that could actually exist. But then the smell hit her, a blend of rotten meat and excrement, and a horror became real once more. The creature bellowed again, and this time Connie responded with a scream of her own. "Alright, you bastard," she thought as her scream echoed off the high cliffs around them. "It's you or me, let's go." The shade eyed Connie with bemused interest and then began to looking at it from her to the house and back again, as if urging her to look at the destruction that is greatly wrought. With dread building in her heart, Connie glanced towards the house. Though the smoke and flames, she spotted a small figure struggling to escape the ruins. "Grandma." At the sound of her voice, the old woman began wavering frantically. "She's alive, though," thought Connie. "Alive." Connie's legs sprang to life as she raced across the yard towards the flaming wreckage of the house. Before she could advance more than a few steps, the shade opened its mouth and let out a roar powerful enough to uproot trees and send them flying. The blast sent Connie trembling through the air before smashing her against the rocky earth. Stars danced in front of her eyes as she tried to remember how her legs worked. Get up now. As Connie struggled to her feet, the shade stomped towards the house and pinned her grandmother to the ground with the tip of the claw. The old woman struggled to move the claw from her stomach, but she might as well have been pushing a mountain. She coughed briefly, sending a small spray of blood into the air, then collapsed to the ground, her energy spent. Connie lurched to her feet and only to fall back to earth with a grasp. Her ankles were on fire. One or both of them were surely broken. Ignoring the pain that screamed through her body, she began dragging herself across the ground, leaving a drunken trail of dust and blood in her wake. "Grandma, hold on, just a little longer." Her grandmother's face was turning blue, her eyes rolling back until only the whites were exposed. Connie pulled herself across the ground with maddening slowness. The distance seemed to increase with every single. The shade glanced between 2 women and flicked out its tongue, its giant mouth turning up at the corner. Short, panting breath belched from somewhere deep inside its core. "Bastards laughing at us." She had no idea which a mindless creature could experience emotion, but there could be no doubt the shade was taking joy of their suffering. "Yeah, I see your plan." The shade moved its claw slightly, allowing Grandma to breathe again. It was clearly keeping her alive, only to snuff her out her life when Connie was close enough to touch her. "I'm going to kill this bastard." Summoning all her strength, Connie rose to her feet. There was a sickening snap from her right ankle as the foot twisted backwards. She forced it from her mind and began to hobble towards the monster. Pulling a small knife from the pouch at her waist, she leapt on the foot that pinned her grandmother and plunged the weapon deep. "Give her back," she screamed. "Give her back to me." It was like stabbing a rock. After a few swipes, the knife broke at the hilt with a dull snap. The shade panted laughter again, then raised his tail and sent it rushing through the air towards the young girl and it latched to his foot. Kane never had a chance. The tail struck her square in the chest and sent her crashing into the burning wreckage of the home. As she lay on the ground with blood pouring from multiple wounds, a small, weak voice spoke up. Kane? Kane's vision blurred, but she forced herself to focus on the sound. Finally, her eyes cleared enough for her to make out her grandmother's hand reaching out to her through the smoke. Grandma? Kane, you gotta run. You can't beat this one. Oh. Kane grabbed the hand and held on with all her strength. Grandma, come on, we have to go. The old woman coughed loudly. One of her hands, slick with blood, slipped from Kane's grasp, then thumped the ground. Grandma, no. I said run, goddammit. You have to get through. The thought would stay forever unfinished. Before she could say another word, the shade's clawed foot descended, smashing through the remains of the road down upon the shattered figure of the old woman. Blood oozed from gaps in the creature's toe as a terrible putrid smell assaulted Kane's nose once again. She stared at the foot, dumbfounded, convinced that she was seeing could not possibly be real. When the creature finally lifted its appendage, all that remains underneath was a twisted, unrecognizable mass of rubble and red. Her grandmother was gone. Kane blinked, trying to feel the hand which had been in hers just a moment before. For a fleeting instant, she could remember the warmth of that embrace, trembling with a finger, but then the sensation drifted away on the breeze and was gone. Memories flashed through Kane's mind, one after another, faster and faster, until it became a meaningless jangle of noise. Kane screamed then, a thunderous sound that echoes off the cliff and seemed to roll away forever. The shade eased forward, black ichor poured from its mouth and dissolving into smoke on the ground below. The earth shook with every step as it crept towards its prey. Kane's body slowly rose as if controlled by a mad puppeteer. Her arms and legs were bent at impossible angles. Her head lolled dangerously to the side, and yet somehow she managed to stand. Staring at the shade, her eyes began to glow with a deep red fire. The creature, so confident just a moment before, took a slow, hesitant step back, trying to discern if this broken human could possibly pose a threat. Kane seized the moment, laughing like a mad woman. She leaped into the air and plunged shattering hilt of her knife deep into the leg of the shade. The shade shook Kane off like a fly, sending her crashing to the earth once again. Her chest rose and fell slowly, as if a great weight were resting on it. Moist sound of pain echoed through her mind. Something warm and thick oozed from her ears. Is that blood? I think it is. I think I'm bleeding to death. No, can't die. Grandma told me to live. Deep inside Kane's mind, something finally broke. The sound, the pain, the smoke, and flame were all of it faded away until all that remained was a single incantation repeated over and over again. Kill it, kill it, kill it. As a spark was Kane slowly began to flicker and die. She felt her desire to kill and her desire to live blend into one. The distance between heartbeats grew longer and longer and longer. Finally!
The beast approaches. Oh, I know.
More reading. God damn it. Of course.